about to begin. So let's have a word of prayer to begin. Heavenly Father, thank you for the ability to work for you. Thank you for the privilege of being able to represent you. I ask you now that as we learn of ways that we can extend our evangelism through social media and through digital means, that you will help us to have an understanding of what you need us to do and that we will follow your spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. So we're actually not going to be too long tonight, I don't think. We're going to just go through a number of different things. We have a list of topics, and we'll go through them. So we're going to deal with social media evangelism, but specifically for this upcoming drive, because it can be quite difficult to coordinate social media if you're not all in the same place. So the things we'll go through tonight: we'll deal with social media ministry, the purpose, the benefits, design and ministry, volunteer challenges, the difficulty working, with volunteers as opposed to hired persons, proposed solutions for dealing with that, and then the content categories and design templates, which are part of the proposed solutions. So, 3 good reasons. That's all we really need. 3 good reasons for social media ministry today. 1, there's a song that talks about, I want to be where you are, dwelling in your presence. That's pretty much what we're trying to do. Just like how Jesus found himself where the people were, we want to be where they are, dwelling in their presence, in their news feed. So social media comes in very handy for that direct contact. Also, we want to inspire and influence people. It's a really quick and easy way to spread the word, whether that's the word of God, an inspirational message, anything like that. Social media can be very, very helpful. And not only can it do that, we also have sharing is caring, as in it's a gift that keeps on giving. So when you share a photo or a post on social media and you open it to the public, somebody else can share it too. And whatever word of inspiration you shared can keep giving and giving and giving for as long as people share it and as long as it lasts online. So there are real numbers to back up the effectiveness of good social media management and good photos and good design. Design is really important these days, especially for social media and anything tech or web or app-based. These are some screenshots from YouVersion. They create these verse images. They're really nicely designed. And they had 120 million verse images created in 2017, and then 220 million verse images shared. Of course, they're online, which makes it super easy to hit numbers. Well, not super easy, but it makes it really good and really useful to have it online, have beautifully designed posts. That means that they can hit numbers like 220 million, and that doesn't include images. That just includes the verses that people have shared online, just sending to each other and that kind of thing, because it can be quite hard to track images, because once you take an image, you share it on WhatsApp, share it on Facebook, you don't really have control over where it goes and who shares it from when you share it. So those numbers would actually be a lot higher than 222 million. So there are a number of challenges in trying to coordinate volunteer efforts. So in some of my work, I've worked with a couple charities and nonprofits, and very often they depend on volunteers to manage their social media. And these are some of the challenges they'll face, which I think we'll also face in trying to coordinate the social media management. There's, of course, the fact that content creation and content management, it can be very demanding. It can be time-consuming. There are a number of different tasks that you have to do, and it can take a lot of time, not just to do them, but to get the approvals and make the changes and go through the back and forth of doing that. It also means social media also requires multiple skill sets. So by that I mean, for you to do really, really good social media, you need to be hitting all the points. So it's not just about being able to write something or ask a question that's interesting. Today that's not enough, because people don't read as often as they used to. People like photos. So anything visual tends to do much better than on social media than just, say, writing, unless it's a blog or something like that where people expect to read. But that's a very niche kind of area. So social media often requires copywriting, which means finding a way to write the text or the copy, we call it copy in the industry, in a way that's interesting, really catchy. That's copywriting. There's a graphic and communications design. This makes the image look good. It makes it effective in terms of your communication. So the graphic designer isn't just going to make it pretty. They're actually going to make sure, well, is this image positioned to reach the target audience? Will they be able to understand it? If this is to reach an older person, you know, they'll adjust the text, the fonts, everything like that for that market. If it's for a much younger person, the colors, the fonts, and so on, the imagery for that market. That's what your designer does. And then, of course, there's the administrator on social media, which would be the person who is coordinating everything. They may be posting the information. They may just be making sure that we get the copy on time, we get the graphics on time, we get the stuff going up across the channels on time, and it's positioned for each of the channels that it's going on. By channels, I mean like what we would call a social media platform. So Facebook is one channel, LinkedIn is another channel, Twitter is another channel, WhatsApp is another one. It can also be difficult to coordinate across borders and across varying skill levels. So if you have someone, say, who is not a professional in graphic design, but they have Illustrator, or they have Photoshop, or some other program, they can do a little something, but that's very different from someone, say, who's a trained graphic designer, who's been working in the industry for a number of years. The output that they'll put out will be very different. But you don't want to have things varying so widely on social media, especially if it's supposed to be coming from the same source. And then, of course, the geographical borders, you don't know each other, and you won't necessarily see each other. So that could be a challenge. We have solutions for these challenges, though. And of course, with all of these challenges, that means that it can be quite difficult to maintain a high standard of both visual and written communications, because you want the language sounding the same. Like if it's the same organization or entity or person speaking to you, you want that always sounding like it's the same person. And you want the visuals, likewise, looking similar, like they're related. That way, if somebody sees a visual, they can easily recognize it. Oh, yeah, this is GNM 2019. So we have proposed a solution to try to coordinate things, and that's the use of templates and guidelines, which can allow everyone, regardless of their skill level, to be able to contribute. I mean, you would need to have at least a little bit of skill in the area that you want to volunteer in, but you don't need to be experienced in it, not very experienced. Right, so we'll also identify clear roles and responsibilities. That makes it a lot easier for you to know exactly what you're to do, where it's supposed to go, along with shared files, which means you'll put the things in the shared file so that everyone can have access to them. You can see what the designers are working on. If you're a copywriter, if you're an administrator, you can see what everyone is doing. And when you're seeing what everyone is doing, that means that if you're doing something, when you're seeing it, you can kind of adjust what you're doing to fit in with everything that has gone before. So, our proposed solutions, we've identified the channels that we want to work with for the crusade. There's Facebook, which is very popular in the Caribbean. I think right now, the last set of data I heard was that it was the most popular app in the Caribbean. It's not in the world, but the Caribbean is different. There's WhatsApp. WhatsApp has been very interesting because WhatsApp is very popular, especially in Barbados, where people will take things off of Facebook, put them in WhatsApp. They'll get more shares on WhatsApp than they do on Facebook. Sometimes, in some cases. There's YouTube. We're going to be having a number of the sermon videos on YouTube. And those will also go onto the website. There'll be a Crusade website, a GNM website. And there's also Twitter, and we use Hootsuite to coordinate. Because if you post it in Hootsuite, you can pick which channel you want to share it on, and share it on a number of them except WhatsApp at the same time. I don't think you can share on WhatsApp and Hootsuite now. Right, the roles and the teams. So there's the role of the copywriter. So these are the volunteer roles. So I think you may be getting, or you may have gotten, a survey form which would let you identify what kind of role you're interested in. So these are those roles. We can take some questions or anything like that if you have any. There's the copywriter role, which deals with the post copy and the captions. So post copy would be, let me tap back here so you can see. Post copy would be the text that goes inside the picture. So like this one, the post copy is do everything in love. 1 Corinthians 16:14. The next one that's in the picture, that's the post copy. The post caption now is what goes like in Facebook on the side, where you might say a little something more about that. Like you might say something like, this was a really inspiring text today, something, something, something. If it's for the crusade and there's content that could be linked to it, like if it's a quote from a sermon, you might want to paste the link to the video of the sermon. That way people can get more information. So the caption is where you give more information about the post. That bit is not a picture. It doesn't need to be very pretty, but if possible, you can put in links and hashtags if there are any. The designer. The volunteer designer deals with layout and the design of the copy. The captions do not need designing, so you don't need to touch that bit, but you'll deal with the design of the copy. We'll go into the examples when we get into the design bit with the templates. So there are templates provided that all the designers can use. Now there's lots of variety that you can get with the templates. It doesn't mean that you'll be limited or that everything will look the same at all. There is the coordinator, and that's the person who's just monitoring and make sure everything is going well. This person can also act as the editor, because it can be very difficult to edit your own work if you're writing it, because your eye will start to see everything as you meant to write it as opposed to how it actually is. And the coordinator plays this role. They'll make sure that everything is spelled correctly, that it's very clear what is meant in the post, both in terms of the copy and the captions. So the coordinator needs to read through everything. So read through what's proposed for the copy and what's proposed for the content before it goes up. So before the designer works on it, that needs to be read through and okayed. Before it's posted to social media, that needs to be read through and okayed. And then the coordinator also actually posts the content. So they'll take what the designer did and take what the copywriter did and put it on social media. And then, of course, there's the monitoring and moderating and responding. So somebody might comment on the post or ask a question, where's the crusade being held? When can I come? What do you mean by this? The role of the coordinator, well, all the coordinators, because there'll be more than one, would be to monitor and respond as nicely and kindly as possible. So, the content categories. So this is what we're proposing that makes it pretty easy for someone who is not experienced in social media management, not experienced in copywriting, to be able to produce some pretty good content. So we've put in word counts, because keep in mind for the content, the copy that's going to be written is going to need to go inside a certain amount of space. There's only so much space on Facebook, on Instagram, and so on in the picture, and you don't want to put text so small that nobody can read it. So ideally, a maximum of 140 characters for your copy, and we've put some examples just so you can see what your copy might be. So a sermon topic is something that can be quite interesting. For the sermon topic, interesting, catchy, upcoming sermon titles for recently posted videos. And of course, you can talk more about what the sermon was actually about in the caption that goes with it. So if the name of the sermon was Jesus the Good Shepherd or Jesus the Rose of Sharon, that's what the designer will lay out. The sermon topics, we actually want to keep these bits for the more professional designer. The other content areas. Those can go to persons who don't have as much professional experience, but these are the ones, the sermon topics specifically, that we would really want to stand out and to shine and to be very, very consistent for sure. Their sermon quotes. So that the pastor said that was interesting, or someone who did a presentation at the crusade that they said that was interesting, you just pull a quote from them. It doesn't have to be a full quote. That means you'll have to be listening at the crusade. It can be a very, very short quote. Like, say it was for the topic, Jesus the Good Shepherd. A quote that might be said during that. The pastor might say something like, Jesus cares for you because you are his. He made you his own at the cost of his life. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. Fits within the word count, and it's something that you can pull out. You can make a post of it. You can design it in the background, and that can stand on its own and be shared on social media. You can put a hashtag with it in the caption, anything like that. There are also Bible texts. When the pastor's preaching a sermon, he's probably going to have a text. You can always pull that text and create content out of that. For Jesus the Good Shepherd, it might be, my sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me. Keep in mind that you can always find a Bible version that's interesting. So if it's not KJV, you could pick another one. There's NLT, there's Message. Just have a read of the different versions and, just pick one that sounds approachable. Because sometimes the language in the KJV isn't as approachable for somebody who is not a Christian, who's not familiar with the Bible, who's not familiar with that way of speaking, because we don't speak like that anymore. So for social media especially, you want it to be as relatable as possible for the person who is there. Kind of like the whole thing we started with I want to be where you are. Like, you may need to adjust the language to meet people where they are. The lesson topics. So there are a number of different lessons. We usually do the lessons around crusade time. Sometimes you'll do them in the community and that kind of thing. Those lesson topics will also be online. You can create content out of those titles. If you wanted to, you could pull excerpts from the lessons. That's fine also. And create posts out of those. The titles, the subtitles, anything like that. Those could make for very good content. These would also be ones that we would probably want a more professional designer to deal with these ones, the lesson topics specifically. So for sermon topics, lesson topics. Testimonials. This is where you could have fun if you are a copywriter. You can ask people, to just tell you a little bit about their story. And you can edit it down into just a little snippet and share that on social media. It doesn't even have to be a full sentence. As long as it makes sense and you think it can be encouraging or inspiring or something like that to someone, then, go right ahead. And of course, for these, you can add a hashtag to them. That can make it quite interesting. So for example, the example here, this person was talking, we don't know what they said at the beginning, but whatever experience they had, it taught them that God doesn't just give them the bare necessities to survive. They say, he wants to bless me with so much more. And it has the hashtag, won't he do it? So that can be an interesting way for you to engage persons who come to the crusade. Ask them to give you a testimony and let them hashtag their experience. And you can share their hashtag, share their first name if they want to share it, like if it's Jane or whatever their first name is, you could share that. It doesn't have to be their whole name. Just, try to keep it relatable, hence the first name. Discussion questions. So now these ones specifically, these should not be, I guess, what we would call Adventist hot potatoes. The social media isn't the forum for that kind of discussion. Really, that's something that you'd want to keep internal. For someone outside, they may not be familiar with the things that we might discuss inside. So we want to keep it as relatable to everyone. So the discussion questions should be as positive as possible. They should encourage respectful and inspiring discussion with an effort to be inclusive as possible for all people. So not a question that's very difficult or that you need to have a lot of knowledge to be able to understand or to be able to participate in the discussion. So the person should not have to know exactly everything about what the Adventist Church believes to participate in a discussion. So it needs to be as relatable as possible. So an example would be, well, what can you do this week to share Jesus' love with your neighbor? Sometimes we don't think of the application of what we're learning. So this allows the person to think about, well, what am I actually going to do this week? Not what is somebody else going to do or what should happen. And by putting in this week, it gives it a time. So not what am I going to do in general to share Jesus' love. What am I going to do now to share Jesus' love? Inspiration. So short prayers or motivational or helpful quotes or tips or that kind of thing. These tend to be quite popular on Pinterest and on Instagram, these quotes and everything. So we can do that same kind of thing too. Quotes might include things like a prayer. Father, your Lord, let everyone I meet see you in me. That's a nice, very short prayer. Or Father, you're patient with me. Help me be patient with others today. That's a prayer that's quite relatable to many people. An inspirational quote might be, faith tells us that no matter what lies ahead, our God is already there. By making it either about me or us or we, it's a little bit more inclusive than just you should do this or you should do that. So where possible, try to keep it very inclusive and inspiring. And that brings us to the end of the first part about the content, and we'll move into the part about how we actually apply these in terms of the design, the templates, and what we'll do with it. Okay, right. So we'll jump into the sermon topics. Right before we do, I just want to remind you to register at goodnewsbarbados.com or register at goodnewsdominica.com, depending on where you're at. goodnewsbarbados.com or goodnewsdominica.com. So let's jump into the sermon, the templates. So we've put together a number of different templates, and we've pulled together some examples so you can see what the template would look like in use, whether it's by a more advanced designer or someone who is still learning and still refining their craft. So on the left, this is a template, the template background. And then on the right, it's how a designer might use it in application. So the copywriter would have pulled out what the topic was. So they would have pulled out the information, outrageous grace. They would have written it down, put it in a table. They would have written a caption to go with it. So there'd be the topic, outrageous grace, a caption, all of that would be in a table. And you can we'll create a shared drive, a Google shared drive, Google Docs shared drive. That way you can put the information there. Everyone has access to it. The designer will go in the shared drive, pull out the information, the copy, which would be outrageous grace, and they'll drop it in to the template, and they can treat with it however they want to. Well, within guidelines, because there are a number of fonts that we've recommended. That way we keep things looking consistent. So on this one, outrageous grace, they've done a little bit something more. This is a more advanced designer, but even someone who isn't very advanced, they'll be able to put the information on, and it'll look all right. It'll fit in with the whole campaign. It'll be branded for the crusade so that wherever it goes, everyone knows, okay, yes, this is GNM 2019. These are some other variations. You can kind of see the similarities between the templates. These are all sermon topics. So there are certain things that characterize the GNM templates. There's this gradient effect in the background. These ones utilize a photo. That one utilizes not quite a photo, it's a vector. But all of them have a certain look. So that way, everyone is consistent, whether it's somebody who's relatively, well, actually, all of these designers for the sermon topics would have some experience, so it won't be completely new to design. But all of you, I think maybe you'll be able to have a chat on Skype or something like that just to, make sure you're on the same page. That would probably be recommended. But these examples, you could see the similarities with this gradient effect on all of them, and then a graphic and the title of the sermon is placed right in the middle for these ones. And the text is laid out a little differently for all of them, actually. Like the outrageous grace, it's got that whole kind of outrageous, speedy kind of look. Beyond the resurrection, and then fatal attraction. It's got, the fatal is very interesting and in keeping with what a fatal attraction might look like in terms of the fonts and the typography. So, if you are not an experienced designer, you're still good. There are options for you. So these are the templates for sermon quotes. So if the pastor says something interesting, copywriter will write it down, designer will take that copy, and if you're new to design, you can just drop it in on the background of the template. This is the template here. This is if you just dropped it in as it was. It still looks all right. It's still recognizable. There are a number of different templates to pick from, so you're not limited in your options. And if you wanted to do a little bit something more, you can do the gradient effect on the text itself. Still looks like the GNM campaign, still has all the branding, but it's still the template. These are a couple other examples using the templates. This one has the open Bible in the background. This is just the template. This is it with the Bible text on it. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me. That was the text that we referenced earlier as an example. You could also get a little more interesting if you wanted to. You can put some gradients on it. This one, the text is enlarged and it's really big and it has that nice gradient. This one, they picked a blue background. That one, they went with the white template, put a gray gradient on it, stretched out the text a little bit more. So you could do a lot of different things. So the length of text that you have would determine, how big you can go, how small you can go. It might influence what you choose to do with the text. Do you choose to make some things bigger, something smaller within the actual text itself? Do you choose to put some color on it, put effects on it? All of that would be a decision that you can make when you're designing them. These are some other template examples for like the inspirational quotes. A couple others. So as you would see, even though you have set templates, there's a lot of variety that you can get. And these are actually only with a few of the colors. This is the same quote, different templates. Of course, if the quote changes, that will shuffle everything for the text and how it looks. But all of these have gradients on it. They all look different. Right, these ones are the template for the discussion questions. So you can just drop the text on there. It'll fit in quite fine. And that brings us to the end of our templates. We still have a bit more work to do on creating the templates and refining them. That way we have a large number of templates that you can pull from. We're also going to make sure you know what colors to pick from, what fonts to pick from. All of that would be supplied in the Google Drive. That way you can just go in there, have a look at it, get what you need to get whatever resources you need, and, write, design, put it back in, and hopefully everything will go well. So I think that brings us to the end. Yes, that does bring us to the end. Thank you very much. Don't forget to register, goodnewsbarbados.com and goodnewsdominica.com. Thank you.